22 minutes is nothing on a clock. It is the length of a coffee break, the time it takes water to boil, the distance between routine and disaster. But at 18,000 feet over Germany, alone in hostile sky, 22 minutes can become the entire measure of a man's life. Second Lieutenant James Howard knew this the moment his radio went silent. 1 second there had been the faint crackle of voices, wingmen calling bearings, bomber crews reporting flak bursts, the controlled chaos of coordinated war. The next, there was nothing. No static, no distortion, just silence so complete it felt unnatural. He flipped the radio switch once, twice, checked the circuit breakers. Everything was in place. Still nothing. He was alone now, inside a machine moving faster than any living thing had moved in human history, surrounded by enemies who could appear and kill him in seconds. March 11, 1944. The sky above Germany was already crowded with war. Far below, factories turned steel into weapons. Above them, hundreds of American bombers cut pale scars across the blue sky, their contrails stretching for miles. Each bomber carried 10 men and several tons of explosives. Each bomber was also a target. Howard's P-51 Mustang flew just behind and above the formation, its polished aluminum skin reflecting sunlight in hard flashes. The engine in front of him, the Packard-built Merlin, roared with mechanical certainty. 12 cylinders, liquid-cooled, producing over 1,400 horsepower. It was a machine built for speed, precision, and violence. His job was simple in theory: protect the bombers. In reality, nothing about it was simple. The bombers themselves flew in rigid formation, stacked in defensive boxes designed to maximize their overlapping machine gun fire. Together, they created a moving fortress. Alone, they were vulnerable, and the Luftwaffe knew it. Howard scanned the sky methodically, dividing it into invisible sectors. Left, right, above, below, then back again. The process never stopped. Fatigue and distraction killed pilots faster than bullets. At this altitude, the air was thin and brutally cold. Frost crept along the edges of his canopy. His oxygen mask pressed tightly against his face, each breath dry and mechanical. For a moment, nothing moved except the bombers and the wind. Then he saw them. Contrails. Thin white lines forming high above the bomber stream, converging like predators circling prey. German fighters. Messerschmitt Bf 109s. Focke-Wulf 190s. Fast, agile, lethal. They climbed deliberately, positioning themselves for attack. Howard's wingmen saw them too. He watched their Mustangs bank away, accelerating upward to intercept. He followed instinctively. The Mustang responded immediately, nose lifting, engine roaring louder as speed converted into altitude. The aircraft felt alive beneath him, every vibration transmitted through the control stick into his hands. He rolled slightly to maintain position, and lost sight of his formation. It happened in seconds. A thin cloud layer drifted between him and the others. A momentary distraction, a slight difference in speed. When he emerged from the cloud, the sky around him was empty. His wingmen were gone. He scanned desperately, searching for their shapes, their contrails, anything. Nothing. Only bombers ahead, fighters above, and himself, alone between them. His radio remained silent. Isolation in combat was more than physical. It was mathematical. Every fighter pilot understood the arithmetic. One against many was not combat. It was survival measured in seconds. Standard doctrine was clear. Rejoin your formation. Avoid unnecessary engagement. Preserve aircraft and pilot for future missions. Doctrine was written by men who understood probability. Probability said he should turn west immediately. Probability said survival depended on withdrawal. Howard checked his instruments automatically. Fuel quantity, adequate, but not unlimited. Ammunition, full. Engine temperature, stable. Everything was functioning perfectly. Everything except the situation. Ahead of him, the bombers flew straight and level, exactly as ordered. They could not maneuver aggressively. They could not evade. Their survival depended entirely on escorts. Without escorts, they were targets. He saw the first attack begin. A German fighter dove from above, accelerating rapidly, its dark silhouette growing larger against the sky. Cannon flashes flickered along its wings. The bomber it targeted shuddered violently as shells struck its fuselage. The bomber did not explode. Instead, It simply began to fall. Slowly at first, then faster. Structural damage, not fire. Wings failing under stress. Gravity finishing what gunfire had begun. Howard watched it for less than a second, long enough to understand what would happen next. The German fighters would continue attacking, one bomber at a time, breaking the formation apart, killing the vulnerable, turning order into chaos. Unless something interrupted them. His mind processed the options with mechanical clarity. He could leave. No one would blame him. His radio was dead. His formation was gone. No one could expect him to fight alone against superior numbers. He could survive. He could live. He could go home. His hands tightened slightly on the control stick. He thought briefly of St. Louis, of quiet streets, of a life interrupted by war. Then he looked forward again at the bombers. 10 men in each aircraft. Hundreds of men total. Flying straight into danger with no ability to defend themselves. He made his decision without drama. He pushed the throttle forward. The Merlin engine responded instantly, its roar deepening, propeller biting harder into thin air. The Mustang surged ahead, accelerating toward the enemy fighters. Howard did not think of heroism. He did not think of glory. He thought only of geometry, distance, speed, angles, and the simple fact that if he did nothing, men would die. The German fighters were still positioning themselves, confident, organized, expecting minimal resistance. They did not expect resistance from one man. They would soon learn otherwise. Howard adjusted his oxygen mask, steadied his breathing, and climbed directly toward the enemy. Behind him, the bombers continued forward, unaware that their survival now depended on a single aircraft between them and destruction. Above Germany, at 18,000 feet, the sky had become very large and very empty, except for one Mustang climbing toward 30 enemy fighters. The first German fighter never saw him coming. It was a Focke-Wulf 190, painted in muted gray camouflage, its pilot focused entirely on the bomber formation below. The aircraft was already committed to its attack run, nose down, engine screaming as it accelerated through the thin air. Cannon flashes flickered along its wings, each burst capable of tearing apart aluminum and flesh alike. Howard approached from above and behind, closing fast. The Mustang was faster in a dive. That was physics. That was fact. He aligned the gun sight carefully, adjusting his approach angle by fractions of a degree. Combat was decided by margins too small to see, only to feel. The distance collapsed rapidly. 200 yards. 100. The German fighter grew large in his windscreen. Howard squeezed the trigger. The Mustang's 6.50 caliber machine guns erupted at once, the vibration hammering through the airframe. Bright tracer rounds streaked forward, converging on the enemy aircraft. The round struck the fighter's fuselage and cockpit in a tight cluster. The effect was immediate. The Focke-Wulf snapped violently to the left, smoke pouring from its engine. Pieces of metal tore away in the slipstream. The aircraft rolled inverted, then plunged downward, falling out of the fight. Howard did not watch it crash. He was already searching for the next threat. Another German fighter appeared ahead, climbing aggressively toward the bombers. This one saw him and reacted instantly, braking hard into a defensive turn. Howard followed. The Mustang rolled smoothly, its controls precise and responsive. He pulled into the turn, feeling the G-forces press his body downward. The enemy fighter tightened its maneuver, trying to force an overshoot. Howard anticipated the move. He eased his turn slightly, preserving his energy advantage, then cut inside the German pilot's arc. The distance shrank again. He fired a short burst. Round struck the fighter's wing root. The German aircraft shuddered and dove away, trailing smoke. 2 enemy fighters now disengaged. But more were coming. They had noticed him. The German pilots adjusted quickly. They abandoned their attack runs on the bombers and turned toward the Mustang instead. Their formations shifted, predators redirecting their attention to a new threat. To him, Howard counted them instinctively. 1, 3, 5. More appearing behind them. Too many to engage directly. He did not try. Instead, he moved constantly. He climbed when they dove when they climbed, forced them to chase him instead of the bombers. Each maneuver disrupted their timing, their positioning, their coordination. He was not trying to destroy them all. He was trying to break their rhythm. The sky filled with movement. Green tracer fire streaked past his canopy. Cannon shells exploded nearby, shaking the Mustang with concussive force. The aircraft trembled but held together. Howard rolled sharply to avoid another attack, the horizon spinning around him. He pulled up into a climb, then reversed direction abruptly, forcing an enemy fighter to overshoot. He fired again. The German aircraft broke away immediately. Another attack interrupted. A Messerschmitt approached head-on, both aircraft closing at combined speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour. There was no time for hesitation. Both pilots fired simultaneously. Howard saw the enemy's cannon flashes, saw the tracer rounds streaking toward him. He adjusted his aim by instinct alone and squeezed the trigger. The aircraft passed each other in less than a second. Howard did not know if he had hit it. He could not afford to look back. Every second required attention forward, scanning for the next threat. The bombers continued their mission above him. Steady, predictable, vulnerable. Howard remained between them and the enemy fighters, positioning himself deliberately to intercept any aircraft attempting to climb into firing position. He became an obstacle, a moving barrier. The German pilots attempted coordinated attacks, approaching from multiple directions simultaneously. Howard countered by disrupting each approach before it could fully develop. He fired when he had opportunity. He maneuvered when he did not. His ammunition counters began to drop steadily. His fuel gauge moved toward empty. His engine temperature climbed dangerously high. None of it mattered. What mattered was time. Time bought with speed. Time bought with aggression. Time bought with refusal to retreat. Minutes passed. The German fighters grew more cautious. They had expected an easy attack. Instead, they faced an opponent who refused to behave predictably. Howard forced another fighter to break off its attack on a damaged bomber, firing from extreme range to disrupt its aim. The German aircraft rolled away rather than risk closing distance. Another fighter attempted to approach from below. Howard dove toward it, forcing it to evade. Again and again, he denied them clean attack runs. He did not need to destroy them all. He needed only to make the attack too costly, too complicated, too dangerous. The bombers flew on. Behind him, the sky remained hostile. Ahead of him, survival remained uncertain. But he stayed between the bombers and their killers. Alone, one aircraft, against many, and still fighting. By the time the relief escorts appeared, Howard's world had narrowed to fuel, altitude, and motion. The German fighters were still there, but they no longer pressed with the same aggression. Too many of their attacks had been spoiled. Too many firing passes disrupted. They began circling wider now, testing rather than committing. Howard's ammunition counters hovered near empty. His fuel gauge was worse. The engine coughed once as he eased the throttle, reminding him that even courage ran on gasoline. He climbed one final time, placing himself high above the bomber stream, scanning the sky in slow, deliberate arcs. No radio, no wingmen, just contrails, distant glints of metal, and the fading shapes of fighters turning east. Then, from the western horizon, new contrails appeared. Friendly ones. A flight of fresh escorts, P-47 Thunderbolts, closing fast. The German formation reacted immediately. Their attack dissolved. One by one, the enemy fighters banked away, diving toward the safety of their own territory. The fight was over. Howard did not chase. He throttled back carefully, allowing his engine temperature to fall. His hands, which had been steady for more than 20 minutes of continuous combat, began to tremble slightly now that the immediate threat had passed. Below him, the bombers were still intact. Scarred, smoking in places, but intact. They continued west, their formation ragged but unbroken. He glanced at his fuel gauge again. The needle hovered dangerously close to empty. He calculated the distance to friendly territory in his head. It would be close. He turned west and began the long flight home. The debriefing room that afternoon was crowded. Bomber crews talked over one another, recounting fragments of what they had seen. A single Mustang diving through German formations. Repeated attacks. Fighters breaking off runs they should have completed. The intelligence officer asked Howard for numbers. How many fighters? He shook his head. Too many to count. How many destroyed? He hesitated. Maybe 3. Maybe more. He could not be certain. Gun camera film would later confirm multiple kills. Bomber gunners would insist it was more. The exact number became less important than the outcome. The bombers had made it home. Nearly all of them. The official report traveled quickly up the chain of command. A lone fighter pilot engaging a formation of roughly 30 enemy aircraft to protect heavy bombers deep over Germany, without radio contact, without support, and without orders to do so. Within weeks, the recommendation for the Medal of Honor moved through Washington. On June 1, 1944, President Franklin Roosevelt placed the medal around James Howard's neck. The citation spoke of conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. It described his repeated attacks against overwhelming numbers and his refusal to disengage while the bombers remained threatened. Howard stood stiffly at attention. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled. When asked what he had been thinking during the fight, he answered simply, "I wasn't." When asked why he had stayed instead of returning to base, he paused. They needed help. That was all. The war did not end that day. More missions followed. More bombers rose into German skies. But something had shifted. Long-range escort fighters, particularly the P-51 Mustang, would soon accompany bomber formations all the way to Berlin and back. Loss rates began to fall sharply. The Luftwaffe could no longer isolate and destroy heavy bombers at will. Air superiority became not just a goal, but an inevitability. James Howard continued flying. He completed his tour. He survived. After the war, he remained in the Air Force, flying jets in Korea, eventually retiring as a brigadier general. He rarely spoke about the mission over Germany. The medal stayed in a drawer. Those who had flown bombers on March 11th remembered differently. They remembered contrails spiraling around them, green tracer fire slashing through formation, and one Mustang, alone, diving again and again into superior numbers, turning the sky into a place the enemy could no longer dominate. 22 minutes. That was all it had taken. Not to win the war, not to destroy the Luftwaffe, but to keep dozens of men alive long enough to fly another day. History often records wars in numbers, sorties flown, aircraft lost, cities bombed. But sometimes history turns on something smaller. A broken radio, a choice not to turn west, a single pilot deciding that survival was not his alone to consider. The sky over Germany is quiet now. The contrails have long since faded. But the lesson remains. When the moment comes, and the arithmetic says retreat, sometimes one person refuses the calculation. And for 22 minutes, that refusal can change everything.